Change Your POV podcast is about building confidence in your own beliefs, morals, and opinions while challenging yourself to be open, humble, and curious about things that you are unfamiliar with, don't have experience in, or straight up disagree with.
We will explore concepts and ideas that will challenge you physically, mentally, and spiritually. Personal introspection is among the greatest skill sets you will learn to hone. The foundation of your success is rooted in trust, gratitude, and forgiveness.
So join us as we explore things that we are unfamiliar with, strengthen things that we are, and are always challenging ourselves to become better.
Change Your POV podcast, where perspective is the vantage point of success.
Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back.
Change Your Point of View podcast. I, of course, am Eddie Lazary.
And I am Bennett Tanton.
And this is episode 221, our first, we call it our first official full episode of our relaunch. So welcome our longtime listeners. Many of you have reached out to us over the past, 11 months or so since the last time we recorded. And it's like, where the hell did you guys go? You just dropped off the face of the earth. What's going on? And we're like, we're really busy right now. But now we decided to come back and kind of do this again. A little bit different format. We covered that in our last, called our relaunch first episode, which is episode 220. So if you want to kind of listen about kind of what we're doing today and what the format of the show is going to look like, I encourage you to go back and listen to 220. It's a quick 30-minute episode. Some good content in there, I think. And now we're going to jump right into what we called our 3-segment show. And again, just to kind of recap, for those that maybe don't have time to go back to listen to 220, and you just are curious as to what the hell is in store for you, we've broken up the show into 3 segments. The first segment, we're going to be covering about 30 minutes of a book. And, of course, each show we're going to cover down on a different chapter. We decided to choose our first book, and the title of that book is
About Face.
About Face. And I think the reason why we picked this book is because you and I are both very big fans of Jocko and the podcast, of course, but also his books, Dichotomy of Leadership and Extreme Ownership. And he raves on and on and on about this book. And he said it was one of the books that he actually took with him on his deployment, and not only read it for reasons I guess anyone would read a book like that, but also this book it was almost like a field manual in a lot of ways on leadership. And I was like, that's kind of interesting to take a book about Korean War and the Vietnam War and use it as a leader in our conventional conflicts as essentially as a user manual or as a like a field guide. And I kind of understood it, but now I really get it when we started digging into reading the book and listening to the audio of the book. But so that's why we chose the book, because Jocko convinced us that it was a good read, and he's correct. It is a very good read. It's a longer book, but I'm not shy of a longer book, especially if it's got great content. So that's going to be our first segment. We're going to be covering that book, and then our second segment, another 30-minute segment, and we're going to be talking about just what's in the news, military news. Could be Army, Navy, doesn't matter. Just Department of Defense, things that are happening, kind of current, real time. So that's
unfortunately, this first episode will be Marine heavy.
Yes, which is okay.
Just because I'm a Marine. But
yeah, a Marine wearing Army uniform.
So anyway.
And then our final third segment, it's the longer of the 3 segments. It's about an hour in length-ish. Could go a little bit shorter, could go a little bit longer. But that's going to be used to really banter back and forth.
Could just be complete jackassery for all
jackassery,
we know.
Yes. So if you're interested in the book review, that's the first 30 minutes. If you're interested in what's happening in the world today around military news, that's our second, third minute segment. And then we get into our hour-long-ish segment on a particular topic. So that's our layout for today. This is episode 221. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, my friends, let's get into this book.
So, we have About Face, The Odyssey of an American Warrior by Colonel David H. Hackworth, U.S. Army retired, and Julie Sherman. And the new version, as you've heard us talk about in the last episode, the new version of this book, the republished version, has a foreword by Jocko Willink, U.S. Navy retired. Well, let's not. Navy SEAL retired.
Right, yeah.
So, and I'm going to... So you open the book, Maps of Korea and Vietnam, because Colonel Hackworth is a veteran of both Korea and Vietnam. Kind of neat. And then the dedication is to Steve Przenka, who showed us how to soldier, to Henry Dober. Is that how you would say his name? Diabor.
It's DeBoer.
DeBoer.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Who showed us how to die. To Glover Johns, who showed us how to lead. And to all the doughboys, the ground pounders, the grunts, the American infantrymen, past, present, and especially future. To them, this book is dedicated.
And that's it. Yeah, I love that dedication, especially the one about Henry DeBoer, who showed us how to die. And I'm like, that's, when we get into the book, we'll talk about it. But the interesting thing about the Korean War, as the book kind of really goes into good detail about, the Korean War is kind of like a middle war between, obviously, World War II and the Vietnam War.
Well, technically, we're still at war.
Right. And what's interesting is that with the Korean War is you end up with the old-timers, they call them, back then. The old-timers of the Korean War were essentially World War II veterans. And many of them ended up coming back into service to serve in the Korean War as a result of their, what's it called, the Ready Reserve Commitment, right?
Not just that, though, but I suspect a lot of them volunteered again.
That's true, right.
Guys might have been
drafted. So you got these old-timers that essentially...
You see now, and this is just the...
Yeah.
You see that parallel between current-day veterans and... why would it be any different? Why would, like, guys that get out and fail at transition, which is something we talk about a lot, and they're like, well, let me go back to what I know to regroup. Right.
Yep. So your seasoned leaders in the Korean War, many of them served in World War II. And then conversely, many of your seasoned veterans in the Vietnam War served in the Korean War. So it kind of carried forward, even though technology changes quite a bit between World War II to Korea to Vietnam, as it does in all future engagements. The one thing that stands firm is leadership, right? You can change the weapon, you can change the uniform, you can change, tactics, you can change a lot of things, but a good leader is a good leader is a good leader, right?
And that goes back to,
right, exactly,
Alexander.
Yeah, right.
If you really want to look at it, and before him leadership is leadership.
And I'm going to read a little bit here of the author's note, and I highlighted this section of the book in particular because, having served in Iraq and having experienced combat firsthand, there's a lot of things that it's hard to describe to those that haven't served in combat to really understand, the war stories in general, right? And a lot of times I find myself telling war stories to colleagues or friends or whatever, and sometimes those stories they don't get changed, but they get highly edited, I guess, for
Softer ears.
Civilian consumption, I guess, right? So I'm just going to read this here because it spoke to me. It says, war stories present two problems to authors striving for the truth. First of all, if you live long enough to tell them and have enough of an audience to practice telling them to, through the years, war stories become just that, stories. Just as time distances the storyteller from the events themselves, so do the repeated tellings. Gradually, the stories are embellished in places, honed down in others until they are perfect tales, even if they bear little resemblance to what actually happened. Yet the storyteller is completely unaware of how far he may have strayed from the facts. Those countless tellings have made the stories the truth. The second problem with war stories is that they have their genesis in the fog of war. In battle, your perception is often only as wide as your breadth of sight. 5 participants in the same action, fighting side by side, will often tell entirely different stories of what happened, even within hours of the fight. The story each man tells might be virtually unrecognizable to the others, but that does not make it any less true. And I think we've said this many times on the show, in particular around the title of the show, Change Your Point of View, is it's about perspective, right? You can have one battle and you can have 5 different foxholes, and everyone in those foxholes are fighting in the same battle, but each, 2-man crew in each foxhole is going to have a totally different perspective on that one battle. They have different experiences, and when that battle is over and they get together and they start to compare notes, it's almost like it's 5 different battles happening, but it was really one battle just from 5 different perspectives. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of the theme, not only in the show, but also through this book, is understanding where other people are coming from. So, like, for example, we can go through a battle, in Iraq, and one guy, his experience is extremely traumatizing and ends up, affecting him or her for a long, long time, even after the military, and suffers incredible bouts of PTSD and other things. And then somebody else could have fought in that same battle and not really have been affected by it at all.
Nothing.
So, right, and that's one of the things that I see in the veteran community is this. I don't know what's the best word for it. It's like a comparison of.
Well, and it's not just that. I mean, it is, but it's also there's a stigma.
Right.
That gets associated with things, and everybody's different. And
right.
That's just the bottom line. I guess what it really comes down to is, and everyone's experiences and reactions are different. They
Absolutely.
Just are. And you know what? That's a hard thing for veterans a lot of times to cope with, because it's always suck it up, drive on, right?
Yep.
And you don't have time to stop and mourn. And actually, Jocko talks about that in his foreword.
Oh, he does.
A little bit. I don't know if we want to jump right to the foreword.
Yeah, man.
But I can read that part. It's basically in the first 3 paragraphs. So one SEAL KIA is inbound to Camp Ramadi, killed in action. When the call came over the radio that Army company commander who was supporting my SEALs in the field, I felt instantly nauseous. I wanted to throw up, but I knew I had to remain calm. I had to keep my emotions in check. And as the commander of SEAL Team 3, Task Unit Bruiser, I knew the whole Tactical Operations Center and my entire task unit would be watching my reaction to this. So I took a deep breath, did my best to seem composed and in control. And beyond that, I wasn't quite sure how to react or what to say or what to do. This SEAL, soon known, reported as Mark Allen Lee, was the first SEAL killed in Iraq. He was shot and killed while assaulting a building in south central Ramadi on August 2nd, 2006. A hero, young and full of love and life and spirit, now in an instant gone. SEALs had been fighting in Iraq for more than 3 years at this point, and there had been some casualties, but no SEALs had been killed, and no SEAL from SEAL Team 3, which was formed in 1983 and had ever been killed in action. While other SEALs from other teams had been lost in Afghanistan, no one above me in the immediate chain of command had ever been in sustained intense combat, much less suffered from men being killed. Even though I had drilled the tactical mechanics of how to react when a man was lost, we had never trained on how to handle death from a leadership perspective. No one had ever even discussed it with me. There was no guidance from my senior officers on the matter. I had to get my guidance from somewhere else, so I turned to the man who had offered me so much valued advice about war and about leadership. I turned to Colonel David Hackworth and his book, About Face. In its well-worn pages, I found the counsel I needed. The fact is, generally, there is no time out for mourning on the battlefield, but it's really no different than the father of 10 who comes home to find his house on fire with all his kids sleeping inside. He doesn't stop and cry over the first child he finds dead. To do so would be a sign to sign a death warrant for the other 9. A commanding officer is often in the same situation. To do anything but to continue on would be complete dereliction of duty, and in the larger picture could possibly lead to even worse carnage among his troops. So you do what you have to do, and only later, when things settle down, do you allow yourself to grieve. And everyone grieves differently. So
right.
That's, I think, what he's saying.
I think that's powerful because I experienced much of the same type of thing in Iraq. We were there for 2.5 weeks. On April 10th, 2004, my first soldier was killed, Specialist Justin Johnson, and it was a different experience. No one ever experienced that before, right? And no one really exactly.
And you surely hadn't.
No, definitely not. And no one really knew what to do. Like, what do you do? I mean,
like what? Do I go talk to the chaplain? What am I supposed to do here?
Yeah, like nobody knew really what to do. I mean, we got his body to the right place, and we signed the right paperwork, and there was like an incident report that we had to fill out and sign.
But still, at the end of the day, that's still SOP.
Right. Yeah, but then after that, it was like, and then finally, I got called. I was the senior squad leader, and I got called into the company commander's office, first sergeant's office, and I was there with my platoon leader and platoon sergeant, and it was basically given the instructions to go and pack up all of his personal belongings, get all of his gear out of the room that he was in with a roommate, inventory all of his items. I mean, and I was just like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know that had to be done. I mean, it makes sense now, right? It's like, yeah, of course, right? Well, who else is going to do that, right? But at the time, I was like, oh, yeah, like, right, we need to do that. And it was such a, everyone kind of in the bay, in the area that we were living in, as I went in with basically a military tote or a locker, to kind of go through his personal effects, and I had to go through everything because I had to what's called sanitize, right, and make sure that there wasn't maps and graphics and any type of OPSEC, I guess, is for lack of a better term, contained with any of his personal effects, and then also make sure there wasn't anything that would embarrass him, his family, or the military, right?
Right.
And I'll just leave that open to whatever you might think that might mean. But, and so I started going through and literally had to go through every page of every notebook that he had, every book, everything. With a fine-tooth comb, I had to go through everything. And it was difficult because I learned more about my soldier after he had died than I did when he was alive. And And that's a hard thing, right? And it was a very emotional thing to do, and I didn't want to do it, but I knew I had to do it. So it was an obligation of, as his squad leader, to do. But having given the choice, I would not have given that responsibility, that burden onto anyone else. And once, and that's the thing is, we don't want to forget him. We'll never forget him, but we have to remove everything and make way for essentially what ended up being a replacement, right? And that's a whole nother difficult thing, is to bring in somebody new.
Right.
To essentially replace a lost soldier. That is tough, man. And I'm sure it's not easy for that replacement. Now that replacement is sleeping in the bed, essentially sleeping in the bed of a soldier killed in combat, right? Tough thing, man. And these are the things that you go through in combat that you don't learn in PLDC. You don't learn in BNOC or ANOC. You don't learn in basic training. You don't learn this stuff in the reserve when you're training. You don't learn it at NTC or wherever you're doing your training, right? I mean, you go to NTC and you've got casualties, and like the CO will come up and give you like a little casualty card, and you got to act out the fact that you got a compound fracture or something, and you get them to the CCP, and then it's over, right? No one takes that scenario all the way through up to and including packing up a dead soldier's things, and that's nothing to say about the mourning aspect. And you're right, there is not time to mourn. I think everyone spends time mourning in their own way. I think everyone shed tears in their own way and mourned the loss in their own way at the time. But that true mourning doesn't really happen until you come back from deployment and you're in the safe zone, I guess. But when you're out there and you've got to mount back up, you got to get back in that Humvee, and you got to get back out on the route, and you got to get back into the populace and back out where the bad guys are. That is not the place. That's not the time or the place to have your mind wander and go through that process of mourning.
Right. Well, I remember, so something I tagged in, I guess, moving through that into like the introduction.
Yeah.
Something that I had tagged that kind of goes hand in hand with that is just how crowded your mind gets in a war. Like not so much in it, but as you look back on it, right?
Yeah.
And how so here, I'll just read what the colonel says in the introduction, right?
Yep.
A soldier's memory is clouded, not just crowded. A soldier's memory is a crowded place. More can happen in a minute of a soldier's wartime than in a novelist's lifetime, and happen again and again. Moments of such excruciating incoherence that to shape it and balance it is to counterfeit it. One might as well try to shape a tempest. These moments are fantastic, scary, scarily credible, grotesque, sentimental, heartless, unusually inexplicable, rarely of beauty, terrible and otherwise, though they can be noble. There is no distance between the man and the action. Nothing falls between the man and the chaotic moment except the years of training and anticipation. Quote, a predicament of exceptional awkwardness, unquote. According to a northern soldier in Antietam, it is never as though it is hard to conceive of a more demanding assignment than leading troops into battle and keeping them there, saying to a man, do that, knowing that his death might result. A soldier in wartime is a law unto himself in a world unto itself, an exaggerated, exacerbated world of utter disorder and misrule, the devil's paradise. It is either that or unspeakably boring weeks and months of oceanic tedium. How it's that whole adage, hurry up and wait.
Yes.
And then literally, and this is one of those things, this paragraph made me think, right? As I work with veterans, some guys spent 2 years in Vietnam. Other guys have deployed 12, 15 times between Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Right.
Some guys have deployed once, twice, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, they're so individualized in their experience. But here's the thing. There's guys and gals that literally their experience in combat may have been 6 minutes. And that 6 minutes has shaped their entire life.
Right.
That's crazy. You don't really run into that in any other profession other than maybe police work.
Right.
Right? So literally, we're talking about something like, let's just say you have an IED slam and you are the only survivor from a vehicle. You're dealing with something that literally happened in seconds for the rest of your life.
Right.
Right? And your entire being at that point could revolve around that, whether you got injured, whether or not you're getting treatment from the VA. Is that your identity? Is your identity shaped by that 12 seconds? Right?
Right. And some veterans, yes, that is the case.
And some veterans, that is the case. And that's what I look at that and I'm like, Jesus. Like we talk about combat veterans. We use that a lot, right? So people define themselves as a combat veteran. Well, you were only in combat for 6 months of your life.
Right.
But your entire world is defined by that. This is why I love this. It's exactly what this podcast is about. Change your point of view, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to be defined by everything about your service, or are you going to define yourself by the rest of your life? I think it's just, it's one of those choices. It's one of those shifts in point of view that you have to make.
And I think I think everyone that gets out of the military has to come to grips with that at some point. And when people talk about struggles with transition out of the military, I think for a lot of veterans, that's the biggest transition point, is finding a new identity, finding a way to, like for me, I was no longer Sergeant Lazary, senior squad leader of, a Colt Combat Observation Lasing Team, forward observer, fire support specialist. You know what I mean? That was my life. That was who I was. And I get out, and all of a sudden, I'm not that if I'm not that anymore, then what am I?
Yeah, you have to mourn. You almost have to mourn your service. You almost have to mourn who you were.
Right.
So it's almost like a death within yourself, because that's not who you are anymore. Because, like it or not, that person doesn't have a place in civilized society, I guess is a way to put it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and it's different because, a lot of people, they get out of high school and they go to college and they learn and they get educated, and it prepares them for their next stage in life, which is the corporate world, for example. Or maybe you're in a trade school and it's preparing you for that next transition in your life as a tradesman or woman, right? But in the military, it's not like the 10 years that I spent in the military was training me and getting me ready for my next stage in life. It didn't, because that's not the intent of the military. The intent of the military is not to make you successful once you're out, right? It just isn't. That's not it's not their intent.
No, because they don't care.
Right. And some could argue that they should, but I don't know if it's the Army or any branch. I don't think it's the military's responsibility to make sure you're successful once you're out.
Well, this is why we have the VA. This is why we have, 4,000 charities. Right. This is why you have people that have come before you, like Eddie and I, to find a good mentor.
Right. And sometimes the mentor can be a physical person, but in this case,
David
Jocko,
Hackworth.
Right. Jocko was mentored by Hackworth, and that's why we chose this book, is because we want to not only read a book, but we want to be mentored by Hackworth, and that is the process of changing one's perspective.
And let's not be so ridiculous as to think that obviously your military experience, there are so many things that translate to civilian life, right? Of course, duh. But you have to sometimes use your imagination to see that. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray there. And you have to be critical thinking and, I've been in a situation like this. It might have looked totally different, but yet same lessons. So.
Exactly. So we are at our 30-minute mark for the first section of this, and we never really even got into the first chapter, which is 6 February 1951. But I think it was enough of an initial introduction to the book and kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yep.
So I think we can cover bits and pieces of the first chapter along with the review of chapter 2 next week. What do you think?
Sure. Sounds good.
All right, man. I think it was a great dialogue. If you haven't done so already, I highly encourage you to go pick up the book About Face. You can get it on Amazon in paperback. Make sure you grab the one that was recently published this year. The older version, or the original version, I should say, is available. Well, it says it's available.
I'll put a link in. I'll put a link in our Facebook page for it.
Okay, that'll be good. And then it's also available on Audible. So if you are an Audible listener like we are, you can go and grab that. And I'll tell you, sometimes the audio book is made or lost by the narrator. And in this case, the narrator is actually pretty good. So
he is. I would agree.
So very cool. Thanks for that first segment of this book, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the rest of this book.
Yeah, because the first chapter is a doozy.
Doozy, yes.
Moving on to some news. I picked out 5 different articles. We might not get to all of them, but one of them that I wanted to start with, because this last week was Veterans Day, and then my favorite holiday, the Marine Corps birthday.
Yeah.
Which everyone's like, what the? But either way, so I found this article. And it's not an article. It's just it is an article, but it's kind of a history lesson by Paul Zoldra. So Paul actually was a Marine. He now writes for Task and Purpose, but he used to have his own podcast as well, and he's the founder of Duffel Blog. So people might know who he is. Now, I interviewed Paul, and I can't remember if it was for Change Your POV or Cigars and Sea Stories. Do you remember if we did that for Change Your POV or not?
I don't recall the name, so it might not have been.
So this tells you how many, my memory's awful sometimes. Yeah. But I have talked to Paul and interviewed him, and I'm not sure if I think it might have been Cigars and Sea Stories, but either way. So he writes this article. It's called "Sorry, but the real Marine Corps birthday is in July." So I was like, wait a minute. So I'm I'm kind of a history buff, and I had no idea about this, so it's pretty cool. So I'm just going to read it real fast.
Sure.
The U.S. Marine Corps may celebrate its birthday on November 10th, but its real birthday is in the middle of July. It's a fact that most Marines are probably unaware of, but a fact nonetheless, that according to the Marine Corps History Division, which records the official institutional and operational history of the service, the Second Continental Congress passed a resolution that established 2 battalions of Continental Marines on November 10th, 1775, which the Corps now celebrates as its official birthday, with this year marking 245 years of existence. But the History Division notes in its brief history of the United States Marine Corps, the Continental Marines were disbanded after the Revolutionary War for reasons of economy in 1783 and ceased to exist for the next 15 years. So the government auctioned off warships and Continental Marines ceased to exist, as military historian Chester Hearn told the Camp Pendleton Patch. Major Samuel Nichols, the first Marine officer, returned to his former occupation as the owner of Tun Tavern in Philadelphia, where the Marine Corps was put together, right? So yeah. That's the birthplace. It wasn't until July 11th, 1798, that the service known as the United States Marine Corps was established by Congress under the command of the Navy. The act passed by the 5th Congress and signed into law by President John Adams created the nearly 900-man strong Marine Corps, which consisted of 1 major, 4 captains, 28 lieutenants, and nearly 100 sergeants and corporals, and more than 700 privates. For the next 123 years, the Marine Corps recognized this birthday as July 11th. Which I was like, what? As the military division notes, an unidentified newspaper clipping from 1918 refers to the celebration of the 120th birthday of the Marine Corps on 11 July, as usual, with no fuss. Which is funny. Then, in 1921, the Good Idea Ferry caught the attention of the Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time was General John A. Lejeune. I'm going to say Lejeune. All right. But There's some controversy on whether it's Lejeune or Lejeune. But anyway, that's a whole episode unto itself.
And I'm assuming that Camp Lejeune was named after this guy?
Yes, obviously. But see, he's from Louisiana.
Yeah.
And it's one of those my theory is that it's Lejeune. It's kind of like that Louisiana accent where people like Lejeune, because it's technically a French name, right?
Right.
So instead of being like Lejeune, Lejeune, right? So, but they would turn that into Lejeune. That's just my theory. All right.
Right.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. If earlier birthday, despite the 15-year gap from the History Division. So on October 21st, 1921, Major Edwin McLean, officer in charge Historical Division, Headquarters Marine Corps, sent a memorandum to General Commandant John A. Lejeune suggesting that the original birthday on 10 November 1775 be declared a Marine Corps holiday to celebrate throughout the Corps. Major McClellan further suggested that a dinner be held in Washington, D.C. to commemorate the event. Guests would include prominent men from the Marine Corps, Army, and Navy, and descendants of the Revolution. So accordingly, on 1 November 1921, Major General Lejeune issued Marine Corps Order Number 47, Series 1921. The order summarized the history, mission, and the tradition of the Corps and dedicated it to be read to every command on 10 November. Each subsequent year in honor of the birthday of the Marine Corps, this order has been duly carried out. Hey, look on the bright side. Now you can get drunk and celebrate the birth of the Marine Corps twice a year. So Semper Fidelis and happy early birthday. So I thought this was kind of cool. Kind of funny. Good job, Paul. Great little blog post, article, whatever you want to call it. So,
and it's kind of timely because the topic that I chose to discuss is kind of ties into that as well, and it's also by Task and Purpose. Authors Richard Sisk and Gina Harkins of the military.com. So this article was originally released on military.com and picked up by Task and Purpose. So I'm going to read this one because it kind of ties into it. But I got to say first, though, that we've been following Task and Purpose for a while now.
Yeah.
And I just a little bit of some critique to the boys and girls over there at Task and Purpose. The website has turned into a advertisement landmine.
Yeah, a clickbait
minefield.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's so annoying. Like, I totally get it, right? It's a monetization strategy.
Yeah, got to make money.
Right, I understand it, but it's to the there's a point where it becomes like, do I even come over here and read these articles anymore? Because it's like you got articles on the top scrolling across, you got articles down the side, you got articles that break up the content of the article itself, and then you get articles that just randomly pop up in the middle. Like, it is just
it can be
horrible.
Confusing for sure, right?
Awful. So if you're listening to this, anyone at Task and Purpose, I'm just saying,
love your content.
Love your content. A little overboard with the ads. Just saying. But anyway, I'm going to try to get through this article if I can find the actual article amidst all of these advertisements. But it is a new top DoD advisor's controversial proposal, and that is get rid of the Marine Corps. What?
Yeah, I know. I read that too, but
So here we go. Retired Army Colonel Douglas McGregor, newly appointed as senior advisor at the Pentagon, has a track record of making controversial statements, but his most provocative of all might be a proposal to do away with the U.S. Marine Corps. In a 2012 opinion piece for Time magazine, McGregor, decorated veteran of the Gulf War, argued that the Corps was living on its past glories and was unsuited for combat on today's battlefield, with the possible exception of pushover enemies.
And that was in 2012. He said that.
Yeah,
right?
2012. Yeah.
Come on, bro.
And he went further to say suggesting the acronym USMC should really stand for underutilized superfluous military capability. Ugh. This guy, man.
Hey, flush the ego, bro. Like, seriously?
The army did the largest amphibious landing ever.
Right, and that's a very bold statement coming from a guy that was a decorated Gulf War veteran.
Yeah, I mean,
Do we? Anyway, I'm not going to get into that.
Is there such a thing?
I don't know, man. I'm sure.
I don't know. That's kind of an asshole move, and we don't want to be that. But let's.
I went there.
It's just as good as say get rid of the Marine Corps. So I guess we're responding in kind with our own stupidity.
Right, there you go, Mr. McGregor. I won't even call him Colonel. He's not even worthy of it. Most of today's Marine force consists of air mobile light infantry. This is him saying this, right? This Marine force is designed for use in the developing world against incapable opponents from Haiti to Fiji, but not much else. That's end quote. He took exception to previous remarks from the Marine Corps Commandant General James Amos on the future of the Corps as, quote, America's shock force, end quote, of agile and adaptable units vital to the nation's defense against evolving threats. McGregor summed up Amos's assessment this way, saying, quote, rah, the Marine Corps is awesome, and all we have to do is make sure that they have the equipment and training facilities that they need and can always be awesome Marines, rah, end quote. This guy's got some serious
animosity.
Yeah.
Like, bro, did someone piss in your cornflake? Like, seriously. Or maybe a Marine stole his girlfriend or something.
Has to be, man.
I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, homie, settle down.
Wrong.
And this guy, see what's sad, though, and what's kind of scary. I mean, you know what? I'm going to give I'll say it, Colonel McGregor a pass because he said these things 8 years ago.
Right.
Maybe he has a different opinion. I doubt it, but you know what? Maybe he has a different opinion at this point, but he's the senior advisor for the current acting Secretary of Defense. So it's
right.
like,
and that's,
Jesus,
yeah.
bro.
And that's why this article is so timely. It's why it's relevant today, is because he was just appointed this high position within the Pentagon, and we're calling attention to comments that he made, in the past. Now, you're right. He may have different opinions about it today, but I don't know, man. If you feel this strongly
That's
about
some
it,
deep-seated shit,
it,
right
it
there.
is, right?
I mean, he's not the first. He's not the first, obviously, that said we should get rid of the Marine Corps. For sure.
Right.
But it does, in theory, if the problem is Iraq and Afghanistan have muddied the waters. It truly has.
You're right.
And
because
Marines
I was there,
they are naval infantry. That's what they are. Right.
Well, I was there in 0405, right? And there was Army out there doing convoy patrol, route patrols, convoy escorts. There was Marines out doing the same thing. I saw Navy guys out doing the same thing. So it's like, do we really have such diverse jobs today? I guess that if you and again, I'm trying to see it from his perspective. You're right. Do we have are we ever going to fight in a conventional Navy conflict like Midway ever again? Probably not, right?
No, but at the end of the day, you do have, I mean, it is. It's not that it's so specialized that that we couldn't train the Army to do it or have the capability to do it, because of course they can. The thing is it's an institutional difference in the way the Marine Corps works versus the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Space Force or the Coast Guard or whatever force you want to put on the plate. There's an institutional difference in the way they train, the way that they think. It just is. And for someone that's never spent any time in the Marine Corps, Mr. McGregor, I don't think you have.
Right.
You wouldn't know that other than from your own experience and outlook. And again, I don't know where you had the experience with the Marine Corps, but it's almost like he looks at it as at that time when he was making those comments, what are you, job retention? I don't know. Maybe he worked in some areas or maybe he was retired at that point. I don't know this guy. So I don't want to trash him, but his opinions are ridiculous.
Yeah, not very founded on facts. I mean, you are far more qualified to speak on the differences between the military, between the Army and the Marine Corps, because you've served in both, right?
Right, and just in training alone, just the mentality and the way that we were trained to fight. I've explained this ad nauseum. Okay, when I was in the Marine Corps, we were taught to fight at a disadvantage. That's how we trained. We were always at least a 2-to-1 disadvantage, as us having the 1 and them having the 2.
Right.
Okay. Actually, it was more like 3-to-1. So that's how we were trained. You do different things when you're trained to work at a disadvantage. Okay.
Yep.
Violence of action is more important. There's just certain things. When I went to the Army, which was only a year and a half later.
Right. So what you're saying is, just so I understand, so what I hear, what that difference is in a particular ambush, for example, right? Given a certain set of circumstances, the Marine Corps would attack, and the Army would pull back and set up a defensive posture.
Correct, and that's what I was just going to say. So, when I was in the Army, we trained to fight at a 2-to-1 advantage. So, like, if we heard a crew-served weapon, I mean, it's part of the tactics. If you heard a crew-sized weapon and you were a squad, you would halt and wait for the platoon to come up.
Right.
Like, you wouldn't do anything. It was kind of like, hold what you got. If you're in direct contact, obviously fight, but you're not moving on anything.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And I can tell you that a squad of Marines, at least when I was in, we would have flanked that position of a crew-served weapon with a squad.
Right.
And then it got even deeper. You know, I'm just saying that's just the way it was. Like, you're just taught to fight differently. You have a different mentality. This is why most of them are ridiculous. Marines are. I look back now, and you think you're invincible, you think you're whatever, but that's how they were taught to fight. Right. So their arrogance sometimes gets in the way, and they're taught that they're battle-hardened machines. And yeah, it might seem ridiculous, but when you're in that environment, it's not. Mm-hmm. So, you know, yes, we might be crayon eating whatever, jarheads or whatever, but at the end of the day, the normal Marine reaction to that is you're just jealous. Yeah, and we have the best commercials. So
yeah,
so shut up.
Yeah, right. And I think depending on the mission, you definitely there's a need for different tactics given certain situations. In some cases, you need that violence of action as opposed to a fallback and defend
Absolutely.
position, right?
Yep.
So what I found interesting, and
yeah.
and this, I didn't know this before reading this article, but there is actually a historical precedent for arguing to disable or to disband the Marine Corps. So Presidents Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower both attempted to do away with the amphibious service, but these arguments have always been brushed aside by furious pushback from the Marines and their allies in Congress. I didn't know that. I was pretty shocked.
The other thing that's funny, and I'll give it because we have, so the Marine Corps is a self-contained, for those listeners that don't know, the Marines have their own everything, in essence. We can assault a beach, right? We can move into an area. We can take an area. We even have our own air support, which the difference with that is because we have kind of our own Air Force, right? We have there's a Marine Air Wing, and we are kind of our own little self-contained force that can, at the behest of the president, can go and take ground, right?
Right.
So and people have gamed this, war gamed this over the past few years because I'm sure of things like Colonel McGregor's comments. But if you take a modern day Army brigade combat team and put it up against a modern day Army MEU, mm-hmm. the Marine MEU wins like 9 out of 10 times. And that's just because of the way that it's set up.
Right.
It is a shock force. It's made to be the hammer. Not an anvil, a hammer.
Right.
No matter what, it sees a nail, it's gonna use its hammer. Right.
Right.
That's how it fixes its problems.
So I see the Marine Corps as a superior force to take ground, but not
to hold it,
keep it.
No,
right?
And they're not made to hold ground because there's only 100,000 of them.
Right.
Right. I think right now there's 150-ish.
Yeah.
1,000 Marines. That's why the big gripe in Vietnam was always they'd use the Marines to take the ground and the Army to lose it.
Right.
and that's
exactly.
Kind of like the whole thing. They'd bring the Army in to hold the ground and then the Army would lose it.
Yeah.
Ha. Again, that's inter-service rivalry bullshit. But at the end of the day, the Marines just don't hold ground because there's not enough of them.
And if you want a really good dining facility, you bring in the Air Force.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yes.
So what do Marines think about this? Well, in the article, it talks about retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, who is a senior fellow at the Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank, said that McGregor's new Pentagon assignment is likely a non-issue for the Marine Corps. Quote, I do not think it will cause any notable problems, end quote, Wood said.
Exactly. Basically, bro, your shit is weak.
Right.
You can say whatever you want,
Yes.
and it's just words.
Exactly.
It's way above your pay grade there, Colonel.
So that brings us to these segments are quick, man. That brings us to the end of our What's in the Military News segment.
The one thing I do want to say, though, is to all the veterans and military folks listening, happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. And to all my Marines out there, happy birthday. It's belated, but at the end of the day, I hope you folks celebrated the birthday and Veterans Day and had fun.
Amen. Amen to that. And it's okay. There's a lot of veterans out there to get a little butthurt.
Yeah, let's not get butthurt, okay?
Well, a lot of people, because a lot of times civilians, they don't understand really the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And so they'll I've seen it's some crazy things, but I've seen things where people walk around with the red poppies. You know what I mean? On Veterans Day, it's like that's kind of a Memorial Day thing.
Yeah, that's an Armistice Day thing.
It is an Armistice Day thing,
exactly. Right.
Right. So anyway, it is what it is. I'm glad we have these holidays, and we just have time
at the
to
end of the day,
reflect.
Don't be one of those veterans that's like, don't thank me, thank the.
Yeah.
Christ Almighty. We've talked about this ad nauseum, I think, on other episodes.
Right.
But don't thank me. Say it's my pleasure and move on with your day. Okay? That's this person's way of giving thanks to you and showing gratitude. Don't be a fucking douchebag about it. Okay?
Right.
That's what I'm going to say. Yeah. I can't stand that shit.
Well, there you go. Happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday.
Segment 3, we're getting into our final topic, our segment. What is the topic today that we're talking about?
I don't really know. I don't have I kind of figured that you and I could kind of talk about what's going on without getting heated about it.
So is that a way of saying let's talk politics without being political?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the elephant in the room. Yeah. And I don't think people are talking honestly about things per se. And I'm not getting political about it because I just, it doesn't help anything at this point.
But is it even possible to have civil discourse conversation around politics without it turning political? And because I'll be honest with you,
it can be political.
You know that saying when you're at work, what is it? Politics and
religion.
Religion, right, are like the two things that are no topics.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, especially this go around, this what do you call it? Cycle of the presidency.
Yeah.
It's so polarizing, right? It's so difficult
it's
to go.
I know you and I have never seen. I mean, I'm 40. Shit, how old am I? 46.
Yeah.
And you're what? The same? 45, 40?
43.
43. So I know in our lifetime we've never seen anything this polarized.
No.
I'm sure that there has been plenty of times that it has been, but not in this news cycle, as I would say.
Right.
You know what I mean? The 60s, I'm sure, were quite polarizing, and I've heard plenty of stories about this back then, but I still, bro, we're at a point literally where people are the mainstream media is talking about civil war.
Right.
That's kind of crazy.
It's scary, man. and again, it isn't about Biden or Trump. I don't think that, to me, that's not really what it is. What scares me is the extreme left and the extreme right.
Yes.
And it seems like the gap in the middle becomes wider and wider and wider. And I think you're right. I think that, unfortunately, is ripe for some type of, violent. I mean, obviously you got the riots and you got different things. But
I think if neither side, if whoever does end up winning, and this is the thing that I'm going to say, no, you're only lying to yourself if you're telling yourself Joe Biden has won at this point. You are, because the battle's not over. People that might remember, and I understand people are going to be like, oh, it's a different situation, but it's not. The legal battles went for over a month in Bush versus Gore.
Right.
Okay. And it was it was Al Gore with all the lawsuits, and there was a ton of them. It was only one state, too. So that even makes this more complex, because you're literally talking about, President Trump, Orange Man, whatever you want to call him, filing lawsuits in multiple states, right?
Right.
And then you have the whole problem with the media not really giving you the full story. They're just not. And if you think they are, that's fine. Stop listening to us. But that's a lie. They're lying. There are signs of impropriety in this election. There just is. There's evidence there. Where there's smoke, sometimes there's fire, right? And you have to look at that. This is one of those things. If I implore people to be honest with themselves, and that this is the country. We're talking about our country here. We're not talking about, something else. Like, if this doesn't hold, if we can't trust our own elections, what can we trust? And you can sit there and say, oh, well, it's Trump's fault, or, oh, it's the left's fault. Just shut up and look at it from an objective point of view. That's what the show is about. Pull back and look at it from a 30,000-foot view, and you realize what a shit show it is. And it's awful.
You know what bothers me more than anything about all of this?
Yeah.
There's 328 million people in the United States, and these two guys are the best we can do.
Right. And we talked about that. We talked about that with the Trump and Clinton 2016.
Right. And I've shared that with other people that I've had this conversation with, and the response has all been the same. They're like, anybody that's actually worth the presidency don't want to be president, because it's just I hate to say it, man, but it's becoming a less respected position within our country, which I think is a shame.
I mean, what I do know, okay, here's what I do know, is that I feel like, looking at this from a bipartisan view, that both the extreme left and the extreme right are destroying our country. Now, it's kind of always been like that, right? Let's be honest. It's always been that way. Because also they are the loudest.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't mean, but I can tell you, and this election is proof of that we are very divided. Okay. But it's right down the middle. So you have to think about this. There's literally 70 plus million people that voted for both Biden and Trump. So what I really don't like is that both sides are taking wholesale dismissal of 50% of the population.
Right.
And that's not okay. That's not how this is built. And there's plenty of people that'll be like, well, that's why we need to tear it down and redo it. Trust me, folks. And almost every veteran, not all, but a lot of veterans will agree, we don't want to be like the rest of the world. We don't. I don't.
Right.
Even the so-called other free societies, right? Now, people will be like, oh, there's healthcare there, there's this, there's that. And there are good things about them, and that's the way it works for them. But this country works, I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't want to live anywhere else.
Right. Yeah, me neither. Because I've been to other places. I know
have,
other...
and I
right?
and I mean, yes, we've been to some shitholes for sure, right? I don't want to live there, obviously, but I don't want to live in England either.
No, well, I've heard people say, I think everyone should serve at least 2 years in the military, kind of like what the Israelis do, right? And I don't know if I agree with that, but I do think it would be interesting if everyone in the U.S. had to live a year in a third world country first, right? Then come back to the U.S. and let's really be real about,
Yeah. I mean, and you can look at that different ways too. I mean, there's so much devil advocacy in what we're talking about, but this is the point. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind necessarily, other than, listen, we have it really good here. Now, I understand that there's plenty of people that want to spread that to the rest of the world, right? But making us less prosperous isn't going to help them, folks.
Right.
It's just not. Let them, then let's do some things like immigration reform so we can bring more people here. If that's what you want, do something that's meaningful, not tear down what we've created just because it's not fair in your assessment. But you're also tweeting this from your iPhone 12 now, that if you didn't live here, you probably wouldn't have one. Right. So like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yes.
And I just want people to check themselves before they open their mouths and have verbal diarrhea all over everything. Right?
Yep. So let me ask you, what time in our history were we probably as divided as we are today?
Well, you have the Civil War.
Right. Perfect. I'm glad you said that. So I also too believe that era is probably closest to, in terms of the division of left and right, as we are starting to see today. As many listeners know, I'm a big, avid Audible listener, and I listen to a lot of things. And I recently listened to a book called Lincoln at Cooper Union, The Speech That Made Abraham Lincoln President, by Harold Holzer. If you're interested, for those history buffs out there, because I wanted to get a glimpse into our history about how was civil discourse, challenged or met in a different time, especially around the Civil War, because that was obviously a moment of large discourse. And here's a quick summary of the book. Lincoln at Cooper Union explores Lincoln's most influential and widely reported pre-presidential address, an extraordinary appeal by the Western politician to the Eastern elite that propelled him toward the Republican nomination for president. Delivered in New York in February 1860, the Cooper Union speech dispelled doubts about Lincoln's suitability for the presidency and reassured conservatives of his moderation while reaffirming his opposition to slavery to Republican progressives. Award-winning Lincoln scholar Harold Pulitzer places Lincoln and his speech in the context of the times, in an era of racism, politicized journalism, and public oratory as entertainment, and shows how the candidate framed the speech as an opportunity to continue his famous debates with his arch-rival Democrat Stephen A. Douglas on the question of slavery. Holzer describes the enormous risk Lincoln took by appearing in New York, where where he exposed himself to the country's most critical audience and took on Republican Senator William Henry Seward of New York, the front-runner in his own backyard. Then he recounts a brilliant and innovative public relations campaign as Lincoln took this speech on the road in his successful quest for the presidency. So if I would have left out the words like Lincoln in 1860, it almost sounds like it's happening today.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
And this is one of those things that I've always say is that if you're a true student of history, we see these things happen over and over and over and over again.
Right.
Because if you don't, what's the saying? If you're not a student of history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Right. Yep.
And I mean, if you look back at even like as far back as the Roman Empire, same stuff brought it down.
Yeah. And I mean, we already fought a civil war in this country once, 600,000, dead combined on both sides. That is the most U.S. casualties we've had of any war. That's more than World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam combined.
Yep.
Right?
At least on our part, for sure.
On our part, right? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, if we are interested in not repeating such atrocity in this country, we have to. I don't know, man. I don't know what it take. I honestly don't. But it's scary. I mean, I stopped watching the news because it's just turned into almost like a form of entertainment. It's turned into
right.
It's like watching Jerry Springer. Like seriously,
oh, yeah, for sure.
I can get probably better informed and educated news from Jerry Springer than I could from any of these mainstream media outlets.
So we're recording this on the 15th of November, right?
Yeah.
So yesterday, the 14th of November, you had, what did they call it? The MAGA Million Man March or whatever.
In D.C.
And there was nowhere near 1 million people there.
Right.
But if you listen to, again, the mainstream media, and that's what I'll keep calling them, but I'm not some fake news Trumper guy. I want to make that perfectly clear. You listen to them and they'll say, oh, there was, 2,000 people there. There was a lot of freaking people there. I mean, a lot. So yeah. I'd give it somewhere over 50,000. Just looking at the pictures. So there was all kinds of, Antifa and Black Lives Matter showed up,
Wow.
And there was all kinds of fights and, conflicts and whatnot. And it's just like, can we just not? Like, can't we just have, like, real protests without rioting and fighting and whatnot? And that's the part that kind of irks me is I don't know, man.
Well,
and this is why I won't show up, because I also know that there's rhetoric coming from both sides that are so inflammatory, and really it depends on which silo you're in is what you're inundated with. So the left would be like, police are killing black people at numbers unheard of, right?
Yeah.
And that Orange Man bad, Trump is the worst president of all time. And we're basically that America is awful. And that's just not the case on any of those fronts. Now, the right would be like the left, Antifa and Black Lives Matter. You've got critical race theory. You've got that they want to take away healthcare and bring in socialized healthcare. And they want to do this and that and the other thing. And it's all bad, Republican good, Democrat bad, Democrat good, Republican bad.
Yeah, right.
What we need to understand is that when it comes to the politicians, they're politicians, folks. They're not, it's like we like to call them our leaders, but they're in it for themselves, right? So
Right.
what we need to do is find these people that actually care. Right? I mean,
Yep.
I'm sorry, but if you put together one ticket that was a moderate person that took the best of both aspects and put it forward, they'd win in a landslide. Because
Right.
that's what America wants.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. From my opinion and from where I'm sitting and what I saw, nobody was voting for Biden. They're
No.
voting against Trump.
Right. I believe that wholeheartedly.
And because here's the thing, and again, the mainstream media is not going to tell you this. Biden is right back to where we've started, especially as war fighters. We know this. They want to start. They don't want peace in the Middle East. Otherwise, they could have had it. They don't want these things. I don't understand what is so hard to see about this is that the people that are in power, and this isn't just a Democrat thing, it's a Republican thing too. Bush, Obama, even Clinton, all of them in recent past, they have perpetuated more wars than anything. Right? It's
Right.
not good. For what? Because of oil, or that Europe needs natural gas, or what? What is it? It's we're not looking at the actual issues in a clean light. Instead of using critical thinking and looking at both sides of this, and of course everyone has their own opinion and the way that they work, but you've got to look at it at a bigger lens than just the way that we are, because that's what causes these problems.
Right. So what do you think the number one polarizing topic of this political environment that we find ourselves in? Is it inequality? Is it racial inequality? Is it financial inequality? Is it just
You know what? I don't know, because the goalpost keeps changing.
Right. You're right. I
The
don't even
goalpost
know.
keeps moving.
Because that's my thing, right? If we want to have a discussion about the issues, fine. But what are the issues? Because I don't really hear the issues on social media or in mainstream media. All I hear is just this, hate and discourse and good and bad and evil But what is the argument? I guess.
And I
don't
don't
know.
see any real solutions. That's the other thing. It's like we talk about environmental stuff. We talk about race. We talk about income inequality. We talk about, just inequality in general, right?
Yeah.
That seems to me to be what the biggest issue is inequality, and then just, let's be honest, just the way people think,
Yeah, I struggle because I don't really know what the issues are.
And then at the end of the day, too, you throw coronavirus on all of this.
Right, exactly.
So
which completely compounds any issue that we're talking about,
which
right?
is being used as a weapon by both sides.
Right.
It just is. So yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say, folks, is can you just... A lot of the people they're not there for our best interest, and yet we keep electing them back in. And this is one of those things. See, this is why we need to tear down the system. No, it means you need to be more of a participant in the governance of you and your community. And again, let's take this out of the presidential race and into your local community race. How much actual impact does the president have upon your life? Most
not
people,
as much
not
as,
very much. Most
not as
people,
much as your
not very
local,
much.
Leaders,
But
right?
do you even know who your mayor is?
A lot of people don't.
Do you know who's on your town council? Probably not. Because if you wanted to build a deck, in theory, you have to go get a permit to do that.
Right.
How much does that permit cost? Should it really cost anything? These are issues that might affect you. What's your sales tax in where you live? all these things, right? Can you hear my dog barking in the background?
I can, but it's okay. You could hear my dog a minute ago, like whining, like he's being strangled.
Yeah. So
like,
my soundproofing's not completely done, obviously.
but I mean, even down to like potholes in the road, right? Or de-icing in the wintertime. We live in the Northeast, so I'm like those things mean more to me than the bullshit that I'm hearing being argued in mainstream media around the presidency. Right.
I mean, of course, federal taxes, they have
oh, sure.
And how those are adjudicated, that has impact upon us. But other than that, but see, then we can also be accused of just being, middle-class white guys.
Because we are.
But
right.
But I think that just some advice for the left: stop calling people like myself and Eddie racists, because I can assure you that we are not. And I understand that you may think that and you know what, you may be right. I don't know the answer. That the system that we are in is inherently racist, which I can see. I can see your point, right?
Yeah.
But I, Bennett Tanton, am not a racist. I'm not. I mean, what more can I do than to lay my life down voluntarily for you and your children, black, brown, yellow, white? What more can I do to prove that I'm not a racist?
And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about being in the military. I'm not saying that there isn't some elements or levels of racism in the military.
Because there are fucking racists.
Right, exactly. But by and large, it really wasn't about race, ethnicity, or anything like that in the military. We all bleed red, man, and and that was it. When I rolled up on, I was QRF. Whenever I rolled up on an ambush or a burned up Humvee or casualties out on the route, I mean, I didn't be like, I'm gonna run over the white guy and help him first, and I'm not gonna treat the black guy
I can't say that.
You know what I mean?
Even come into my head.
No.
And see, so this is one of those. Again, here we go. We have to think about these things in public relations wise, right?
Right.
If you have your agenda, and one of your things is race equality, right? You can't go and call the people that you want. You just can't shame people into not being racist.
Right.
Or even if they're not racist. Like, I seriously, I want to hear you. I'm listening. I am listening. Tell me how to help. But denouncing that I'm white and saying that I'm a bad person because I'm white and that I was born with white privilege is not the way to get there.
Right.
It's just not. It's not reality.
No.
But again,
it's not
I
a realistic
literally
ask,
had this
right?
conversation and I've still been told, see, what you're saying is racist. Oh my God. You have to stop that narrative. There's got to be a better way for it to happen. And it's called treat people like humans.
So here's my question, right? How do you change that narrative? How does that narrative even begin to change? And I've asked that many, many times in my head, just like, okay, I get it. I understand each side's point of view, but at the same time, like, how does it change? How do we get to more of a level playing field where we can have dialogue around what the true issue is? And do you subscribe to Prime Video?
Yes, I do.
Or Amazon Prime?
Yes.
So you got Prime Video, right?
Yes.
So last night, I can't believe how timely these things are. Last night, I sat down and watched a documentary. It's a 2020, and you may have already seen it. It's called A Most Beautiful Thing. Have you seen this?
I don't think I have. I honestly think it's in my watch later things.
Bro, you've got to watch this. It's an hour and 35 minutes. It's on
Say
Amazon
the name again
Prime.
for everyone.
It's called A Most Beautiful Thing. And this was because what this did for me is it answered the question, how do we change things? Because let's be honest, it isn't rioting. It isn't smashing and burning up stores. It isn't flipping over cop cars. It isn't, that's not how people's minds are going to be changed. That's only going to solidify the position that they already believe.
Well, I can tell you that I think the fact that 73 million people voted for Donald Trump a lot of that is because people are scared and they see him as the law and order guy, right? And that a lot of that vote truly was because they're voting against the rioting. Right.
And you can see over the last 4 years that didn't help a whole lot. I mean, you gotta if you want things to change, you gotta change things at your level. You can't expect any president, no matter who they are, to be the guiding light, so to speak, of change. I mean, they can have that in their campaign slogan, but at the end of the day, it's you as the individual in your community, in your workplace, in your family. You are what helps change that narrative, right? And that's really what this documentary, A Most Beautiful Thing, is really about. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it talks about racial inequality. It talks about, privilege. It talks about, but what it does though is it's you'll see. You just got to watch it, man. As a matter of fact, if you go and watch it, maybe we'll have a conversation about the show in a little bit of the segment for next episode, because it is everything we're talking about summed up into an hour and a half documentary, and it is truly a powerful documentary. And I think if we had more of that, it would really truly change the dialogue and change the landscape of what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Okay. Because it's just brutal to watch this, man.
It is.
And I really get it, like, off slavery, seriously. So it's like you have this slavery issue, you have redlining back in the day. If people don't know what that is, gosh, I wish I could tell you the documentary to watch on it. It was fabulous way that redlining was described, but it's basically there was neighborhoods and areas of cities that were redlined off, where it was highly encouraged that black people not buy homes or be allowed to live in said areas, right?
Right, yeah.
Which is awful. I also understand that what has caused this income disparity, right, is a lot of this is legacy income stuff. Like, you inherit things from your parents, right?
Right, yeah.
And that, on average, black people, their net worth is way less.
Right.
I see that. But again, what is the answer? Is it reparations? Because you can say, yeah, all right, so give everybody $100,000. That doesn't fix anything, though, because it doesn't change. And I think it's the elephant in the room that we have to look at is, yes, equality needs to happen, and I think we've come a long way with that, right?
Yeah.
But I hear a lot of people talking about equity of outcome, and that's not guaranteed to anyone.
Right. No.
How can it be? We can't all end up in the same place, not in the system we live in, and this is part of the problem, is I think people see a system where we all are, they confuse equality with equity of outcome. And equity of outcome is based a lot of times upon your effort, right?
Yeah,
and if you,
sure.
I mean, it really comes down to, if you don't put in effort, you don't get from the system what you need or
Well,
want.
it's the magic bullet syndrome, right? Everybody wants the one thing.
And
that's
the pill.
Just
Everyone
change.
wants to be able to take the pill.
Yeah, Morpheus.
Yeah.
Blue pill or red pill.
Everybody wants to be able to take a pill and you get what you want. It's just not. I mean, and yeah, I guess I understand the concept of white privilege, but man, I'm also not into competitive victimhood. And that's something else that runs rampant in our society is competitive victimhood.
Oh, describe that for us.
So nowadays, it seems like victims are held up on a pedestal.
I've had it worse. I've had it worse than you.
Yeah. I got my ass beat way worse than you did when I was a kid, or, I was way poorer than you when I was a kid, or because of the color of my skin, I was oppressed. And I get that, right?
Right.
But just because I was white doesn't mean I had rosy cherry. I mean, Jesus Christ. So, it's like, but again, that's not what it's about. And unfortunately, part of this is actual language. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't understand the definitions. They say white privilege. It means something different to me than it means to them. And there's actually different definitions that people are taught in college now. Bottom line, that what they say to us is not what it actually means. Right.
Right.
So it's like you need a decoder ring.
Right.
And I mean, because my childhood was awful. I mean, there was a lot of good things about it too.
It couldn't have been.
Because I was white, right?
Right.
And that's just, but that's not what white privilege is about. I understand that, right? But just because I'm white, that's what white privilege is, because I have an inherent systemic advantage in life. That's what the definition is in essence, right?
Right. Yeah.
But again, then we talk about equity of outcome. If you looked back and looked at my life without saying what color I was, you'd be like, this kid's fucked.
Right. Yeah.
This kid is fucked. Like so many other stories of triumph and whatever. You would look at me and say I was fucked. Period. Take color out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people that triumph over that shit every single day. And that's what you have to do. No, you have setbacks. You have things. Like, life is not easy. It just isn't. And you know what? Embrace those times when it's not, because, again, how do we learn? Mindless repetition and blunt force trauma.
Yep.
It's getting through and standing up when you get hit and knocked down. Don't get knocked down again. And
right.
If you do, get back up again and do it differently the next time.
And that's the thing is that's the piece of this that I wanted to kind of
raise up by your bootstraps. That's basically racist too. I've actually heard people say that's racist. How the fuck is that racist?
People need to own their actions.
Personal accountability is racist too.
Well, everyone needs to have personal accountability.
Duh.
Right?
I mean, that's a tantamount freaking thing.
Well, that's the thing is, that bothers me is when, okay, I understand that environment is going to play a factor and opportunity will play a factor and geography plays a factor. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but at the end of the day, it's really about the choices that you choose to make about your life, right? If you're an alcoholic, I understand that that's a problem that you need help with, but that is a culmination of choices that you made, right, wrong, or indifferent. The fact that you're an alcoholic, that is a culmination of choices you made in your life. If you're a drug addict, that's a culmination or an outcome of choices. Maybe it's not one. I mean, you don't have an alcoholic.
Maybe you didn't stick the first needle in your arm.
Right. But at the end of the... Right. But continue. I'm just saying, right? Everyone struggles with something in their life. You're poor, you're homeless, you're jobless, you're, divorced 6 times, you got, 5 kids that you got to pay child support for. Like, all those things that are happening to you or has happened to you in your life. Now, granted, there's certain things that are outside of your control, right? If you're a child and you are, raped or molested by an adult, right? I mean, that's something outside of your control, right? But everything you choose to do in your life after that is a culmination of a choice, of choices that you were making. You've got to own those choices. You can't just say, I am this way because that happened. The answer is, I am this way because of choices that I made in my life have resulted in the condition that I'm living in today. Right?
I think veterans understand this concept better than most people.
But nobody likes to have that conversation because it means that you are culpable for the outcome of your life. Your decisions and your choices are your responsibility. And as soon as you start framing it that way, people vehemently push against it because they want it to be somebody else's fault. It's another reason why they are the way they are. They're poor, they're broke, they're jobless, they're homeless, they're relationshipless, they're an addict, they're, you fill in the blank. It's got to be somebody else's reason or somebody else's fault why those things have happened or are happening to you. And I just don't, I'm not aligned with that way of thinking. I'm just not.
And our change your point of view challenge is to think differently, because Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
You have to change something. And no, change is not easy. It's hard.
It is.
It is hard. And you know what? You know when I really started succeeding in life is when I started turning into those hard things. When I started turning
yes.
into them and heading, I learned it's because in the military, we're taught about, especially in the infantry, we're taught about dealing with an ambush. Okay. Yep. So an ambush is when something or someone hits you from the side blindly and you, or the front or wherever, and you're not prepared for it. Okay. That shit happens in life every single day, or it could. Maybe not every day, but things happen in life. Now, the way that we are taught to deal with an ambush, the most effective way is to turn into it and charge. Because then you close the reactionary distance. You close the distance on how effective the other person or thing is trying to kill you. So now then you're able to kill them.
Right, but that by charging into that ambush, you could get a little bloodier.
Of course.
Right?
And
it's
you could die.
Right. It's going to get bloodier, but it's going to end faster.
Correct.
Right? That ambush will end much faster. And less people will be, as a result, a victim of that ambush. Or you can just keep stay at your distance and become, victims and casualties over a longer period of time.
Right. And hunker down behind a hill that's being shot at with artillery rounds that are whittling away at your hill, and you're not doing anything to save yourself.
Yeah.
It's a very good, what would we call that? An allegory? Is that the right word?
Not sure what you're looking for.
I don't know. I'm just saying it's a very good
analogy.
Analogy. I said allegory, didn't I? Analogy. It's a very good analogy to life. Once I started turning into things, I started dealing with them, and now I truly live my life by, something as simple as going to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning. Are you fucking kidding me? Of course I don't want to wake up at 4 and go to the fucking gym. No, but I know that if I do that, I'm better off in the long run later in the day. Plus my workout's done. Things like making your bed. It builds these types of, no, you don't want to do it. You want to just leave it because it's a fucking pain in the ass. But if you do these things and you turn into them and do them because you don't want to, you're going to find shit gets easier.
There's more reward on the other side
too.
Right. Yes.
And we have a very unresilient society in general. Now, because let's be honest, I understand what being poor is like. It fucking sucks. It sucks so bad. And people, I'm not one of these people that's like, well, they're just on welfare and they're getting their check every month and they're happy. Fuck no, they're not. Of course they're not. Because being poor like that sucks.
Right.
Welfare is not something to live on. But guess what? Unless you do something, you're going to be living that way. It's awful and it's not easy, but you have to do it. I mean, Jesus Christ, I've been there. I don't know how to explain this to people other than just to say it, you know? You can be like, but no, man, I lived in a really shitty situation. And, you know, frost on the inside of the windows in the middle of winter because couldn't afford to turn the heat up, kind of poor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like no color TV, no TV at all except for 3, 6, and 3, 5, and 9. And this is in the 90s. So don't come at me and tell me that I don't know, this shit. Literally don't know how. Going without eating because I had to feed my daughter.
Right.
Or going without eating because we just didn't have the money. Mustard sandwiches were fucking dinner.
Yep.
And I know that there's people that know that. And no, it's not fun. But I promise you that I understand where you're coming from. Okay? So, I don't like going down that road because that's, in my eyes, it's kind of like competitive victimhood. But if people don't know where you're coming from, they don't, they just assume that you don't know.
Right.
But damn, it does suck. And you are responsible for rising up out of it. And no, it's not going to happen overnight. It could take you years and years, but it's getting 1% better every day. That's what you have to focus on, is some kind of forward movement. And you know what? You're going to hit and get pushed back too. You just can't give up. Come on.
And that's the other thing too, is
no one's there to rescue you.
No. It's you got to self-rescue. I recently also listened to Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within on Audible as well.
He's just a quack, Eddie.
And, I know. But one of the things that he said in there that really stood out to me is, how did he put it? It was when your wants, things can really start to happen for you when your wants turned into musts, right? You want to lose weight, or you want a job, or you want to not be poor anymore, you want to, whatever whatever it is that you want in your life. Want a better relationship with your kids, you want a better relationship with your wife, right? Those wants, sometimes it's really hard to obtain those things because you want them. But if you can find a way in your mind and in your behavior to change those things from wants to musts, I must have a better relationship with my children. I must find a better job. I must lose these 60 pounds. I must, get into rehabilitation and stop using drugs. I must go see a professional about my, PTSD or you fill in the blank, right? You change your wants into musts. Things, you start looking at them differently, and you start approaching those scenarios with a much different fervor, with much different behavior than you do, and you're just sitting around wanting things, for your life. So look at the thing that you want the most in your life and just change the way that you approach those and turn them into a must. And you'll notice the things that you're going to do to achieve those musts are going to be way different than the things you're trying to do when they just are currently a want.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of deep, man.
And it's not easy. Again,
no, it's never going to be easy.
It's never going to be easy. And again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, is turn into those hard things.
Yep.
And face them head on, because you're the only one that's going to be able to fix it.
Yep. Run into the fear, right?
It may be happening to you, but you're responsible for what happens to you.
Right.
And how you deal with it. Okay?
Amen.
So...
Well, that wraps it up, man. That closes our segment out. Actually went a little bit over our hour-long segment target, but it is what it is. We said from the beginning it might be a little over, a little under, but we kind of, we covered a lot of ground there. We talked about politics. We talked about inequality. We talked about a whole gamut of things. And some of these things that we talk about might sting a little bit to hear.
And you might hate us and turn us in and get us banned, but... I urge you to not do said banning. Look at it from a change your point of view perspective, and there you have it.
Yeah, man. Cool. Thank you, sir. Good conversation. Look forward to next week. We know for sure we're going to be covering more of the book. I'm not sure exactly what our topics are going to be, but
you won't know.
We'll keep it interesting.
You listen. So.
That's right. So tune in. Make sure you subscribe on your podcast player of choice, whatever that might be. We are basically everywhere. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, or Apple, what is it, Apple Podcasts now? Yeah. They changed the name of it.
Are we in Google too? I think we're in Google Play as well.
I think we're everywhere.
Might have to check these things, but...
Yeah. But put it this way. I didn't change any of those settings.
So there you go.
Unless we got deleted on any of those platforms, we're still available on those platforms. So, and come find us on our social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Change Your POV, and come be a part of the conversation. We also have a group. It's called Change Your POV Squad. It's the squad. Come be a squad member. It's a open group, and you can come in. Actually, is it a private group or is it a public group?
I think.
Okay, it's a private group, but if you come on and request an invitation or request access, we'll grant that. But we'd love to hear what your thoughts are about this show or any other shows coming up. This one might not have spoke to you very much, but maybe some of our future shows will. And look forward to hearing what your thoughts are about it, but also interested in hearing about what you want to hear about. So if you got an idea for a topic of one of these segments, or you want to weigh in on any of the book segments or any of the other segments, let us know. You can find us over there at Change Your POV Squad. All right, man. Well, it's good. Like I said, good episode. Nice to get back on this horse again. Had a little bit of technical hiccups at the beginning, but I think we figured it all out.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man.
All right. Drive forth, Sally forth.
Sally forth.
And we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Change Your Point of View podcast. Pull up a chair and get a seat at the table and be a part of the conversation. Connect with us over on Facebook at our closed Facebook group called Change Your POV Squad. Let us know what you think of the show, good, bad, or indifferent. We'd love to hear your thoughts.